Hello. Ryan's attention was drawn to the sound of laughter. It wasn't unusual to hear Lauren giggling over something on her phone, but today, it seemed different. Standing at the kitchen sink, he glanced across the room at her. There was a light in her expression, a kind of joy he hadn't seen in quite some time. "Something funny?" he asked, keeping his tone casual as he grabbed a bottle of water from the fridge. Lauren looked up, momentarily startled, before her features softened into a smile. "Oh, just a silly meme from work," she replied, quickly locking her phone and placing it face down on the couch beside her. Ryan nodded, trying to shake off the faint uneasiness creeping in. It wasn't unusual for Lauren to be glued to her phone. She was always chatting with friends or colleagues, but there was something in her response that didn't feel quite right. That evening, as they sat together on the couch watching a rerun of their favorite sitcom, Ryan noticed her phone light up. Lauren immediately grabbed it, her fingers flying across the screen as she typed a quick response before setting it aside. "Who's that?" Ryan asked, doing his best to sound casual. "Oh, just Sarah from work," she said, her gaze avoiding his. Ryan chose not to press further. He'd always prided himself on being a trusting husband, the kind who didn't snoop or jump to conclusions. But as he lay in bed that night, staring at the ceiling, the uneasy feeling in his chest refused to fade. In the days and weeks that followed, Lauren's behavior only became more puzzling. She grew increasingly secretive about her phone, keeping it with her at all times, even when she went to the bathroom. Her late nights at work became more frequent, each time attributed to a new project. "They're really pushing us hard," she'd say with a tired smile, leaning in to kiss his cheek before heading out the door. Ryan wanted to believe her. He told himself she was just dealing with work stress, that there was no reason to doubt her. But the small, nagging signs were becoming too loud to ignore. One evening, while he was cleaning up after dinner, Ryan saw Lauren step outside to take a call. Through the kitchen window, he watched her pacing back and forth on the patio, her voice low and urgent. When she came back inside, there was tension in her smile. "Who was that?" he asked, trying to keep his voice even. "Just my manager," she replied quickly, brushing past him. Ryan's unease deepened. He couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to the story. Quietly, he began paying closer attention, looking for anything that might explain the shift in her behavior. The breaking point came one quiet Sunday afternoon. Lauren had gone upstairs to shower, leaving her phone charging on the kitchen counter. Ryan stood there, staring at it. His hand hovered over the device, hesitating. He knew it was an invasion of her privacy, but the weight of his suspicions was becoming unbearable. Finally, with a deep breath, he unlocked it. Her passcode hadn't changed. The messages hit him like a punch to the gut. "Andrew, last night was amazing. I can't stop thinking about you. Lauren, same here. I wish we had more time together." Ryan's hands shook as he scrolled through the chat. The texts were filled with flirtatious exchanges, inside jokes, and plans for secret meetups. There were even photos, selfies of Lauren with Andrew, smiling together in what looked like a hotel room. His chest tightened as the pieces began to fall into place. The late nights, the sudden secrecy, the guarded phone. It all made sense now. Ryan placed the phone back on the counter just as he heard the water upstairs turn off. His heart raced, but he forced himself to appear calm. He couldn't confront her, not yet. That night, as they lay in bed, Ryan's mind raced. Every smile Lauren offered him, every casual touch, felt like a cruel charade. Memories of their years together flashed through his mind. The holidays, the vacations, the small, intimate moments they'd shared. How long had this been going on? And how could she betray him like this? The following morning, while Lauren was still lost in sleep, I decided it was time to dig deeper. It didn't take long for me to find Andrew's social media profile. As I'd suspected, he was a colleague of Lauren's. What I hadn't anticipated was discovering his family. Andrew was married to a woman named Claire, and they had 2 young children together. I stared at his profile, scrolling through pictures that painted a picture-perfect life. There was a Christmas photo of Andrew and Claire holding their kids in front of a glowing tree. Another shot showed them on a sunny beach, all smiles. The realization hit me like a punch to the gut. This betrayal wasn't just mine to bear. It belonged to Claire, too. The next few days passed in a blur of anger and heartbreak. My emotions swirled between pain and fury, but beneath it all, a steely resolve began to form. I couldn't confront Lauren directly, not yet. That would only give her the chance to lie or spin some excuse. I needed a plan, one that left no room for denial. My first step was reaching out to Claire. I kept the message simple, polite, and innocent. "Hi Claire, I'm Ryan, Lauren's husband. I was wondering if you'd like to join us for a neighborhood gathering we're hosting. It'd be great to meet you and your family." To my surprise, Claire responded warmly, thanking me for the invite and confirming they'd be there. With that, the wheels were set in motion. In the days leading up to the barbecue, I threw myself into the preparations. Every detail became a distraction and a focus. This wasn't just about hosting a pleasant get-together. It was about carefully setting the stage for what was to come. Lauren, oblivious to my true intentions, buzzed around with excitement. She seemed genuinely thrilled to pick out decorations and help plan the menu. "Are we inviting anyone from my work?" she asked one evening as we went over the guest list. I paused, keeping my expression casual, and replied with a practiced smile. "A few people. I thought it'd be fun to mix the groups up a bit." Lauren nodded, her expression neutral, but there was a brief flicker in her eyes, a momentary uncertainty that made me wonder if she had the slightest inkling of what I was planning. The night before the barbecue, I couldn't sleep. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling as the weight of everything I discovered pressed down on me. My mind replayed the texts, the photos, and the lies over and over. I thought about Claire, how she would walk into our home the next day, smiling warmly, completely unaware of the betrayal unfolding behind her back. By the time the sun rose, my resolve had solidified. This wasn't just about exposing Lauren and Andrew for their deceit. It was about doing what was right, for myself, for Claire, and for the truth that had been buried beneath their lies. The morning of the barbecue arrived with perfect fall weather. The sky was clear, the air crisp. I got up early, my chest tight with anticipation, and busied myself with the finishing touches on the backyard. Lauren was in high spirits, moving around the house with an easy cheer as she arranged flowers and chatted about how much fun the party would be. I watched her carefully, masking my thoughts behind a neutral expression. By midday, everything was ready. String lights crisscrossed the yard, casting a soft glow over the tables. The grill was prepped, and the food was laid out in an inviting spread. Guests began arriving in small groups, filling the backyard with laughter and the hum of conversation. I played the role of the gracious host, greeting neighbors and friends with a practiced smile, all the while suppressing the storm that churned inside me. And then I saw them. Claire and Andrew walked into the yard, hand in hand, wearing polite, practiced smiles. Andrew looked like the picture-perfect suburban dad. His shirt neatly pressed, his posture casual, but his eyes betrayed a flicker of tension. Claire, on the other hand, exuded warmth and sincerity, her sundress swaying lightly as she moved. She greeted me with a smile that was so genuine, it almost made me falter. But I steadied myself. The moment I had planned for was drawing closer. Ryan greeted them with a broad, welcoming smile, gripping Andrew's hand firmly. "So glad you could make it," he said, his voice carrying a tone of warmth that masked its true edge. Andrew's handshake wavered ever so slightly, his eyes flickering nervously toward Lauren, who had frozen in place near the grill. Ryan caught the brief moment of panic that flashed across her face before she quickly plastered on a smile and gave a hesitant wave. The game was officially underway. Ryan guided Claire and Andrew to a central table with practiced ease, seating them among other guests from Lauren's workplace. Lauren seemed to go out of her way to avoid looking at Andrew, her laughter becoming increasingly strained as the minutes ticked by. Meanwhile, Ryan moved through the crowd with precision, deliberately engaging Claire in conversation. He asked her about her children, her hobbies, and her family. Claire answered with warmth, her affection for Andrew shining brightly in her words. Each sentence made Ryan's stomach churn, but he kept his expression composed, his demeanor friendly. Lauren, however, was starting to unravel. She kept casting uneasy glances in Ryan's direction, as though trying to read his mood. Andrew, too, was visibly tense, his laugh forced as he hovered close to Claire like a lifeline. At one point, Ryan spotted Lauren cornering Andrew near the drinks table. Their heads were bent close together, their voices low. The proximity set Ryan's nerves alight. Without hesitation, he approached them, his voice calm but laced with unmistakable sharpness. "Everything all right over here?" he asked casually. Lauren flinched, gripping her drink tighter. "Oh yes, we were just, talking about work." "Work, huh?" Ryan echoed, letting the word hang in the air with deliberate weight. "Lauren's been pulling some serious late nights for work lately. She's mentioned how busy it's been." Andrew visibly blanched, his face draining of color, while Lauren quickly looked down at the ground. Before either of them could stammer out a reply, Claire appeared beside Andrew, slipping her arm through his. "What's everyone talking about?" she asked brightly, her smile as genuine as ever. Ryan returned the smile, his tone light but pointed. "Oh, just work things. I was just telling Andrew how lucky he is to balance work and family so effortlessly." Andrew coughed awkwardly, nearly choking on his drink. Lauren's face turned an alarming shade of crimson, while Claire continued smiling, blissfully unaware of the tension crackling in the air around her. Ryan allowed himself a moment to savor the scene. As the sun dipped below the horizon, string lights bathed the yard in a warm glow. Guests lounged, their conversations and laughter blending with the sounds of dessert plates clinking. But beneath the surface, an unspoken tension coiled tight. Ryan noticed Lauren's hands trembling as she picked absent-mindedly at her plate. Andrew avoided his gaze altogether, while Claire chatted cheerfully with a neighbor. Finally, Ryan stood, raising his glass. The quiet murmur of conversation dwindled as the guests turned their attention to him. "I just want to take a moment to thank everyone for being here tonight," he began, his voice steady and deliberate. Lauren's head snapped up, her smile faltering as her eyes fixed on him. "It's not often we get to come together like this," Ryan continued, his tone thoughtful. "And it's a reminder of how much we value community. Trust, though, that's the foundation. Trust in our friends, in our families, and in our marriages." The crowd stirred, a ripple of unease passing through them. Lauren's face paled, her smile now entirely gone. "And sometimes," Ryan went on, his voice taking on a sharper edge, "we find out things that make us question that trust. Things that force us to take a hard look at who we think we can rely on." The yard fell silent, the weight of his words pressing heavily on the gathered guests. Lauren sat frozen, her eyes wide with dread, while Andrew's knuckles whitened around his beer bottle. Ryan's gaze shifted, locking onto Lauren. "So, Lauren," he said, his voice cutting through the stillness, "do you want to explain to everyone here about your late-night work meetings with Andrew, or should I?" The silence that followed was deafening. Time seemed to stand still. Every person in the backyard had their eyes fixed on Lauren, the vibrant hum of conversation and laughter from earlier replaced by an oppressive stillness. Ryan remained standing tall, his glass raised, his expression unyielding. He didn't need to say anything more. The weight of his accusation hung in the air, heavy and undeniable. Lauren's voice broke as she finally managed to speak, her words shaky and uneven. "Ryan, I don't know what you're talking about." Seated beside Andrew, Claire frowned, her confusion evident. "What's going on?" she asked, her eyes darting between her husband and Lauren. Ryan let out a dry, bitter laugh, shaking his head. "You don't know what I'm talking about, Lauren? Do I need to spell it out for everyone here?" He turned toward Claire, his tone sharp and resolute. "Claire, I hate to be the one to tell you this, but your husband Andrew and my wife have been having an affair for months." The crowd collectively gasped, a ripple of murmurs spreading among the guests. Claire's face turned ghostly pale as her gaze locked onto Andrew, who looked like he was ready to bolt. "What?" Claire whispered, her voice trembling. "Andrew, tell me this isn't true. I, Andrew stuttered, his face flushed a deep red. It's not what it seems. Ryan slammed his glass onto the table with a sharp crack that silenced the crowd. Not what it seems? He repeated, his voice dripping with disdain. I've got the texts, the pictures, and even the hotel receipts. Do you really want me to lay it all out for everyone here? Claire's eyes brimmed with tears as she turned to Andrew, her voice rising with fury. Is it true? She demanded, the pain in her voice unmistakable. After everything we've been through, everything I've done for you, this is how you repay me? Andrew opened his mouth, but no words came out. His silence was all the confirmation Claire needed. Lauren shot to her feet, the screech of her chair against the concrete cutting through the heavy silence. Ryan, please, she begged, tears streaming down her cheeks. Let's talk about this in private. We don't need to do this here. Oh, but we do, Ryan said coldly, his eyes narrowing. You didn't care about privacy when you were sneaking around with Andrew, so why should I spare you now? The murmurs among the crowd grew louder, neighbors and co-workers exchanging wide-eyed glances. Some looked uncomfortable, shifting in their seats, while others couldn't tear their eyes away from the unfolding scene. Claire's tear-filled gaze turned to Lauren, her voice sharp and laced with venom. A mistake is spilling coffee on someone's desk, Lauren. A 6-month affair? That's not a mistake. It's a calculated betrayal. Lauren collapsed back into her chair, her body shaking with sobs, while Claire directed her anger back at Andrew. How could you do this to me? To our kids? Andrew's head hung low, his voice barely audible. I'm sorry, he mumbled, his shoulders slumped. It just happened. Claire let out a hollow, bitter laugh, shaking her head in disbelief. It just happened? That's the best excuse you can come up with. Ryan stepped forward, addressing the crowd with a voice steady and full of conviction. For months, I've watched these two lie and cheat, thinking they could get away with it. But today, it's time they face the consequences of their choices. Lauren lifted her tear-streaked face, desperation etched into her features. Ryan, please, she sobbed. I love you. We can fix this. Fix this. Ryan repeated, his voice as hard as steel. You shattered our marriage the moment you decided to betray me. There's nothing left to fix. The tension in the backyard was palpable, the silence so thick it felt suffocating. Claire abruptly stood, grabbing her purse with trembling hands. I can't do this, she said, her voice cracking. I trusted you, Andrew. I gave you everything, and this is how you repay me. Claire, wait, Andrew said desperately, reaching for her arm, but she pulled away with a sharp motion. Don't you dare touch me, she hissed, her eyes burning with anger and heartbreak. She stormed toward the gate, slamming it shut behind her with a sound that echoed like a final verdict. Andrew stood frozen, his face flushed with humiliation. He glanced around the crowd, but no one would meet his gaze. I think I should leave, he muttered, his voice barely above a whisper. You should, Ryan said icily, stepping aside to let him pass. Andrew shuffled toward the gate, his shoulders hunched, avoiding everyone's eyes. As he disappeared, the guests began to disperse. A few offered Ryan awkward pats on the shoulder or murmured words of sympathy before leaving, but no one so much as glanced at Lauren. Soon, the backyard emptied, leaving only Ryan and Lauren behind. She stood near the table, her arms wrapped tightly around herself, her entire body trembling. Ryan, she began, her voice barely a whisper. We're done, Ryan interrupted sharply, his tone leaving no room for argument. You made your choice, Lauren. Now you can deal with the consequences. Without waiting for a response, he turned and walked back into the house, leaving her standing alone under the dim glow of the backyard lights. The days following the barbecue were a whirlwind of rumors and repercussions. The story of the dramatic confrontation spread like wildfire through the neighborhood. Lauren found herself at the center of the gossip, not as someone admired but as someone disgraced. Friends kept their distance, avoiding her entirely. Her co-workers whispered about her behind her back, their judgment evident. Even her family, who had once adored Ryan, struggled to look her in the eye during conversations. Meanwhile, Claire wasted no time moving forward. Within days, she filed for divorce, severing all ties with Andrew. She poured her energy into being a mother, attending every soccer match and school event, determined to give her children the stability that had been stolen from her own life. Ryan, too, began the slow and painful process of rebuilding. He filed for divorce from Lauren and began clearing their home of the memories that now felt tainted. He threw himself into his work, rediscovered old hobbies, and spent long moments reflecting in solitude. The house, once a place of love and laughter, now felt like a space of renewal, a weight lifted in Lauren's absence. For Lauren, life unraveled. Her once promising career stalled as colleagues treated her with thinly veiled disdain. Her attempts to reach out to Andrew were met with rejection. He wanted nothing to do with her. The man for whom she had risked everything abandoned her the moment the fallout began. One evening, she sat alone in her small, unfamiliar apartment. Packed boxes surrounded her, untouched since she'd moved in. On the table in front of her lay her phone and the divorce papers Ryan had sent. She hadn't signed them yet, clinging desperately to the faint hope that he might reconsider. But as the days turned into weeks, she began to accept the reality she had tried to deny. Ryan was gone, and she had no one to blame but herself. For Claire, the road ahead was painful but paved with resilience. One night, she stood quietly in the doorway of her children's bedroom, watching them sleep. Their faces were peaceful, untouched by the storm that had shaken her world. In those moments, the pain would creep back. The memories of Andrew and the love they once shared, now eclipsed by his betrayal. But Claire wasn't one to dwell on despair. She sought therapy, working through her emotions and establishing boundaries for her future. She joined a support group for single parents, finding comfort and camaraderie with people who truly understood her struggles. Slowly but surely, she began to piece her life back together, discovering a strength she hadn't known she possessed. One evening, Claire's phone buzzed with a message from Ryan. "Ryan, how are you holding up?" Claire hesitated for a moment before typing her reply. "Claire, some days are better than others. How about you?" His response came almost immediately. "Ryan, the same. Let me know if you ever need someone to talk to." She stared at the screen for a while, wondering what it would be like to meet Ryan again. Not as the husband of the woman who had shattered her marriage, but as someone who understood her pain. Back at Ryan's home, change was evident everywhere. He had gutted the living room, removing every trace of Lauren's influence. Fresh paint, new furniture, and a sense of renewal filled the space. The days felt lighter, as though the air itself had been cleared. Yet, when night fell, memories of what once was crept in, haunting him with flashes of a love he had once believed unshakable. To help himself heal, Ryan had taken up woodworking. The hours he spent in his garage, sanding, cutting, and assembling pieces of furniture, became his therapy. The steady rhythm of the work allowed him to focus on creating something new instead of dwelling on everything that had been destroyed. One afternoon, as he put the finishing touches on a coffee table, his phone buzzed. He wiped his hands on his jeans and picked it up to see a message from Claire. "Claire, would you like to grab coffee sometime?" Ryan stared at the screen for a moment, a small smile forming as he typed his reply. "Ryan, I'd like that." A few months after the barbecue, Ryan and Claire sat across from each other at a quiet cafe. At first, their conversation was cautious, the shared wounds between them making the air feel heavy. But as they talked, the awkwardness faded. Their experiences, though painful, created a bond that didn't need to be explained. "I'm really glad you reached out," Ryan said, stirring his coffee absent-mindedly. Claire nodded, her expression thoughtful. "I think I just needed to talk to someone who truly understands what this feels like." They shared stories of their struggles, the frustrations of rebuilding, and the fragile hopes they had for the future. For the first time in what felt like forever, Ryan felt a connection that wasn't laced with betrayal or bitterness. As they got up to leave, Claire gave him a brief hug. "Thank you," she said quietly, her voice full of sincerity. For everything. Ryan watched her walk away, feeling a warmth spread through him. It wasn't love, at least not yet, but it was something meaningful. Meanwhile, Lauren's attempts to piece her life back together seemed to falter at every turn. Family gatherings were awkward and strained. Her career had hit a standstill, and her social circle had all but disappeared. One evening, she sat alone at her kitchen table, the divorce papers spread out in front of her. The reality of her choices weighed heavily on her. Ryan wasn't coming back. She had destroyed their marriage, and there was no undoing what had been done. On a cool spring morning, Ryan stood on his porch with a cup of coffee in hand. The crisp air felt invigorating, and for the first time in a while, the world seemed alive with possibilities. His phone buzzed, and he glanced at the screen to see another message from Claire. "Claire, want to go for a hike this weekend?" "Ryan, I'd love to." As he stepped back into the house, he felt a lightness he hadn't known in years. He didn't know exactly where life would lead him, but for the first time in a long time, he felt excited about the future. Bye-bye.